So, boys and girls, while Trevor is turning off his camera, we will talk briefly about what we're doing. So, the title of the podcast is called Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, and we've been at this for several months, and we have yet to do any fiction, and that's kind of what I do. I write for Mind Matters News, and I do sci-fi reviews. Now, we want to do other videos besides just sci-fi, but we figured we'd start with something that recently came out. And that, or one of my reviews that recently came out on Mind Matters News, and that is a review of the Terminator. And the Terminator just had its 40-year anniversary back in October, which is why I decided to go ahead and do a review of the franchise. And I would say the first two movies are pretty good, but the last one, like after number 2, the franchise just kind of derails. And it's interesting because as I've been doing these review studies, one of the things that's become apparent to me is that it is almost impossible to find the movie Terminator 3. Now, they're saying it is because of a copyright issue. I can't help but wonder if they're kind of trying to bury the movie because of the other films that came out later, of all these different timelines and stuff, and they're trying to get rid of that one. But that's a little conspiratorial on my part. We don't need to accept that. I'm just putting it out there in the ether as a faint possibility. So, with that said, let me actually pull up the Mind Matters News article really quick, and we will just jump right into that, assuming I can find it. There we go. That way Trevor can see it. Let me close out this window here, and then pull up this one here, and then fade. Also having to produce at the same time, guys, so you'll have to bear with me. So, yeah, Terminator, the sci-fi classic, 40 years on. The best thing about this first movie is that it adheres to the classic view of futuristic robots, cold, callous machines that are bent on one objection. And the reason we put that heading on there is because there's a lot of talk about, the computers becoming just like us and, getting a soul and all this and that. So there's a lot of debate about what AI is and what all it can do. And from my perspective, I don't think it can do much. I think there's pretty well a cap on how far AI can go. I think it's going to be wonderful when it gets to figuring out how to do coding. And I see a future where video game programmers or whoever can just type in what they want to see, and then the computer can code it. And so I think there's a lot of neat things that AI can do, but in terms of it creating the singularity and, replacing humanity, I'm not a fan. I don't think that's actually going to happen. And a lot of people are pretty skeptical of that view, I'd say. And back in the 80s, I think that they still held to the more traditional fear about AI and about robots being hostile. And, of course, there is this kind of caveat that they add in the later films that the robots become self-aware, which I don't think they can actually do. But there have been people out there positing that the robots, whenever they start calculating how to best, help humanity, they basically conclude that the best way to help humanity is destroy it. And so they end up launching all the missiles and blowing people up and all this and that. And so there's a lot of catastrophists saying that that's where the robots are inevitably going to go. And this is what the first movie is basically talking about. It's talking about the robots deciding that the only way to protect the world is make sure humanity's out of the equation because humanity's no good and all this. It's kind of a cynical, dire view of mankind, but I would argue that if this is true, it's more the result of the cynicism of the programmer than it is the program. There's a lot of Malthusian sentiments out there in the tech valley, and I think that those sentiments tend to influence how people calculate humanity's worth. So, for example, how do you weigh a philanthropist in comparison to a nuclear bomb? Well, that's kind of a subjective comparison. One could argue that a philanthropist could do way more good than a nuclear bomb could do harm. Some people wouldn't agree with that. Who can say? So there's a debate back and forth, but this holds to a more traditional view that the robots aren't just going to, become like us and get souls and all this and that. they're going to inevitably be hostile and try to supplant humanity in some fashion. So, with that said, we'll just read the next paragraph. One of the franchises that has suffered the modern media meat grinders, the Terminator series, and this is the reference to the recent films that came out, in honor of the 40-year anniversary of this classic movie, which debuted on October 26, 1984, I'm going to review the franchise. The quality of the first film has stood the test of time, comfortably launching more movies and spin-off series than the Alien franchise. And to be fair, it has been much more successful than the Alien franchise. Pretty much every Alien movie that came after Aliens has been just complete crap. Romulus was okay. I probably gave it a better review than it deserved when it came out, just because I'd been saturated in the crappy films for so long. I was impressed that something mediocre actually came out. But yeah, the Romulus one was all right, and it gives me some hope for the Alien franchise in the future. But where things sit right now, the Alien franchise is not looking very good. It's pretty abysmal. So the Terminator franchise is done significantly better. Terminator 3 is not good, but it's not so bad that it's franchise killing, and that was really the issue of Alien 3. Alien 3 really nuked the franchise, and they had to start all over. They broke their own they broke their own lore, they killed off their main character, they did all these things that basically left the Alien franchise with nowhere to go. And the Terminator franchise, Terminator 3, didn't really do that. It was just kind of a mediocre, bad film. So it's still, like, the Terminator franchise still has life to it. And, you know, the quality of this first film is probably why, because it asked a lot of interesting questions and set a lot of interesting tropes and precedents into the future. So, Mr. Trevor, welcome back.
Thank you.
You finished stretching?
No, but I am back. I was just going to let you keep going till whenever.
Till I ran out of steam?
Yeah.
Yep. So, no, I was just talking, I guess a question to posit to you would be, what do you think about all this AI craze? Like, how far do you think AI is actually going to go? I think it's pretty close to the cap already. I think it's pretty much a lot of hype, and I wouldn't be investing in it right now. I think they're overselling what it can do. I think it's really good for helping with punctuation. It's going to be very good with coding. But if you're talking about anything subjective, like based on the way that they learn, it's kind of hard to explain, but they just understand data. They don't really understand concepts. So, for example, if you have a box in the road of a self-driving car, and this is a bad example, the self-driving cars are better than this. But if you were to have a box in the road, the box only, like the robot only sees the dimensions of the box. It doesn't see a box per se. Like when we look at a box, we have memories of what a box is. We have memories of opening presents on Christmas morning. We can tell whether or not the box is empty or full most of the time. You know, we have certain concepts that help us identify what an object is, and a computer only has length, width, height, maybe a sensor that can detect density or something like that, but it doesn't understand what a box is fundamentally. Yeah. And I think that's going to be a real limitation. They can't understand. They're probability mechanisms. They're not really going to understand, you know, what something is conceptually. So, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, really, AI is just a upgraded computer. At the end of the day, it only reads what we tell it to.
Right.
Ones and zeros.
Right. I made a point earlier about people are saying that these AI programs are always concluding that the best way to help humanity is to destroy it. And I posited the idea that that's really more the result of the sentiments of the programmer than the robot. Like, there's no way to objectively weigh the value of a philanthropist or somebody who helps people versus the value of a nuclear bomb. That's a subjective measurement that people can make. Yeah. The computer really can't. And so a computer is just going to reflect whatever the sentiments of the programmer are.
Yeah.
So, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, if someone who likes humanity and wants humanity to survive, and they create the same AI system as someone who's had a rough go at life. You're gonna get two different results.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I
it's
agree. Excuse me. So, all right. So let me see here. Let's watch this opening clip of the Terminator, and I will see what your thoughts are on the film as a whole.
The Terminator, rated R. The #1 movie in the USA is now playing everywhere.
From a future where men must hide underground has come a machine wrapped in flesh who kills but cannot be killed. Arnold Schwarzenegger is Terminator, an assassin from the 21st century sent back through time. His target is a woman who holds the key to the future. Her only hope is a soldier who has hunted the Terminator from the future into the present.
It's not a man. Machine. Terminator.
What does it want to be?
It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse.
I'm just gonna pause here because 80s music is awesome. Just want to say that. Just yay 80s, yay 80s.
Fear. And it absolutely will not stop. Ever. Until you are dead.
Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator. Terminator.
So, what are your memories of the Terminator, Trevor?
I'll be back.
What's that?
What?
Is it just a catchphrase that you recall?
I love catchphrases. Okay, if you haven't learned that by now, I don't know what we're doing.
Oh, I was
We're
commenting.
doing something wrong.
We're doing something wrong, yeah. Well, I was commenting on how the 80s had kind of a dire view or more dour view on technology. This version of a robot's very different than Data that came out in the 90s, the question of whether or not robots can become sentient or just like us or some such thing.
Oh yeah, well, and back then they were still learning how to use it all.
Yeah.
Use how to program things and whatnot. So they really thought that we'd be a lot farther than we are technology-wise anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of great memes about that.
Like with Back to the Future,
Yeah. Yeah, I was watching a guy saying that we're closer to Back to the Future than we realize. I still don't buy it. They're claiming that there's going to be flying cars out here before too long. I'm like, yeah, well, I'll believe it when I see it. I've been waiting for the flying car since I was a child. It hasn't showed up yet.
Yep,
So,
it's way past, what was it, 2015? Or 2012?
I don't remember. See, this is going to be a mark of shame on me even though I write sci-fi reviews, I haven't actually seen the Back to the Future franchise.
Oh.
I hear it's amazing, but I just haven't, of all the things I've watched, I haven't watched that one.
McFly.
See, that means nothing to me.
You don't know what you're missing.
I'm going to have to, it's on the burner. I'm going to have to watch them.
It'll definitely take you back to the future.
Oh, well, there you go. So I was also commenting in this review that one of the great things about the Terminator films is that things really are kept simple. I mean, the machine has the orders, it carries out the orders, doesn't really care, what it takes to get that done.
And I like how he talks about, and he said it there in the preview, that he doesn't reason, he doesn't bargain or anything, and that's really where AI is there's no reason or anything to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we really have nothing to be afraid of.
Well, unless some programmer decides that the AI needs to nuke us all.
But that's a programmer. That specific programmer has to be intelligent enough to program the AI to be able to hack whatever system is
Well, they
going
can
on.
hack whatever. I mean, I'm sure that that's just a matter of time. But, you know, the idea of just the computers being determined to wipe us out, I mean, that's human sentiment. That's not a machine. A machine doesn't really have sentiments, and it can't really develop conclusions based on data. Like,
Yeah.
that requires abstract thought. That requires things that can't be translated into binary, like value, you know. Value of a philanthropist versus the value of a nuclear bomb. How do you weigh those two? I mean, a computer can't do that.
No.
And that's completely subject to the program. Programmer who's particularly cynical isn't even going to factor in a philanthropist into the equation. They just won't. They're trained to think of us in a negative light. Think of fellow men in a negative light. And so if anything like that does happen, well, it's going to be people, not robots actually doing the killing.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, anyway. The other thing I wanted to point out, the thing that I think makes the first two movies special, is its treatment of the female protagonist. You know, you got a lot of girl power nonsense going on now, but this movie actually does it right. So let me play this clip, this scene, and kind of show you what I mean.
Guard it for me, Big Buns. We're late.
Just want to point out that pun. That pun's right up your alley, by the way.
She's about to have a bun day.
I'm in it, so am I.
It's foreshadowing.
Honey, I have that coffee now, please.
Yes, sir. Okay, who gets the burly beef?
I ordered barbecue beef. I think that's mine, but I didn't
He
order
gets the
fries.
barbecue beef. Mine's the chili beef deluxe.
Okay, who gets the burly beef?
Miss, we're ready to order now.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good.
I'm so sorry. This isn't real leather, is it?
Nice going. How to give you the tip?
Look at it this way. In 100 years, who's gonna care?
So I like
Dun,
that
dun,
scene.
dun.
Yeah, I like that scene a lot. And I like it because you compare that to Terminator 2. That's this little thing called character growth. You start out with a character that's in a weak place, kind of having a bad day, and then, there's all these promises that she's going to, be some prominent figure in some global war in the future. But she doesn't start there, She has to grow into that role. And you see later in the film where she's kind of encouraging Kyle Reese to, get up when he's hurt and all this. These hints that she's going to be this leader, but you don't see it at the beginning. And that's called good writing, because you have a character that starts out in a bad place and then ends up becoming stronger before the end. It's called character growth. But you don't see that, especially in the later Terminator films. Everybody just starts out dour and tough and jaded and all this and that, and there's no beginning point. And that's why I think a lot of these strong female leads don't work, because they are unwilling to show those characters weak at the beginning, and they are unwilling to show them growing into the role.
Which characters you talk about in the third one?
Well, it's not the third one where that happens. It's 4 and 5. They show Sarah. Well, no, it's not 4. It's 5 and 6, because everybody always forgets about Terminator Salvation. But in the later ones, Genesis and Dark Fate. Salvation. What I remember of Salvation is I liked it. I think it's underrated. But that's a whole other conversation. When you get to Dark Fate and Genesis, Sarah Connor is all like tough and jaded and, all this and that. And she's the hero of the story rather than John Connor, And so they just couldn't abide any sort of female or any sort of male contribution to the story. So they had her just as tough as can be right at the outset. And people don't buy into characters like that, regardless of their gender. I've made this point, people forget that, like, even in a movie like Rambo, in First Blood, he's a traumatized war vet.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's tough, but he's broken and damaged and has flashbacks and all the rest of it. Like, he starts out in a weak place, and actually, by the end of First Blood, he's completely broken.
Yeah.
He has that speech, "Nothing is over, nothing. You don't just turn it off." That's like one of the best speeches in all cinema, in my opinion.
Oh,
it's a great speech. But the point is, by the time you get to First Blood, that character is completely broken. And then when you get into Rambo Part 2, that character starts to get built back up. The female lead in that one going, "You're not expendable," giving him kind of the encouragement to actually go and fight. And she actually ends up saving his life, and he gets the resolve to whoop the bad guys by the end. And then by Rambo 3, you've got Rambo kind of in his prime, fighting the bad guys and all this. But the characters don't start there. They grow. And they've completely forgotten that with protagonists.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts, good sir?
You hit every nail on the head. I agree with you.
Well,
I'm gonna have to go back and watch the rest of. Like, just watching these clips makes me want to rewatch the Terminator again.
Makes you very nostalgic.
Yeah, it's like, oh man.
Yeah.
I don't even remember the last time I watched it, but.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I haven't even seen the newer ones.
Don't. They just ruin it for you. I mean, they're absolutely awful.
I think the last one I watched was it. Is Christian Bale still John Connor in the newer one?
Oh no, he was like John Connor for one, and they should have kept that whole scenario. Like, I was excited for the new Terminator movies when they came out because I thought we were finally going to see the robot war. They keep teasing this robot war over and over again, and we never see it. We see it for one movie. One blasted movie.
Yeah.
And I liked it because they fixed one of the major plot holes in Terminator 3, which is John Connor dies. Terminator 3 is really the start of all this, like when the girl power stuff kind of starts taking a turn for the worse, because it was fine with Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
They did Sarah Connor right. She starts out as a waitress, and she starts out as kind of passive. Her experiences with the Terminator make her, like, they encourage her to train, and with Kyle not there, she has to learn how to do it on her own, and she's somewhat damaged because of her experiences, but she has to overcome all that too. And, she grows into being a leader. And, of course, they just nix all that with the newer ones. In Terminator 3, they kill off Sarah Connor for reasons I do not know why. She dies of leukemia or something. And that was a dumb decision by itself. Maybe she couldn't do it because of the contracts or something like that. I don't know. I just wouldn't have mentioned her then. Say her and John had a falling out and, imply that they're going to patch things up by the end of the movie. They didn't need to go the way they did. But anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they did fine with Sarah Connor. Like, that's how a female protagonist should be. But, when they get into Terminator 3... they get rid of Sarah Connor, and then they start talking about this woman that's supposed to be John Connor's wife, and of course, she just magically knows how to pick up a gun and kills a drone right out of the bat, and John's like, "You remind me of my mother," which was very Freudian and weird, because they're going to get married, and it's just like, okay, so you're marrying your mom. That's wonderful. So... anyway, so it starts to go off the rails of Terminator 3, but, Salvation fixed it. They got rid of the weird caveat that John was going to die in the future or whatever, and there was a change in the timeline that altered that, if I remember correctly. And so they got rid of that issue, and then they put John back in the center seat, which was fine. And then they just didn't make any... I guess the movie did poorly. I'm not really sure why, but I guess it did poorly. And so they tried to reboot it a few years back, and they had Sarah Connor as tough and all this and that, but they didn't have Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, which was frustrating. And then, of course, she's much older then, but still, they shouldn't have done the reboot thing. They should have just, kept her as the character and showed her in the future or something. Anyway, but they had this character, Sarah Connor, start out as this strong female lead instead of the waitress she was in the first movie. Which, if you're going to do a reboot, you got to rebuild the character, and they didn't want to put in the work. So that was frustrating.
Huh.
Yeah, it's nuts. But we're talking about Terminator 1, and I keep ranting about the other films. Terminator 1's a good movie, so it's like, how many times do you say, this is a really good film, over and over again? So I guess to end it, I'll posit the major story question that, or the scenario that's laid out at the end, and try to get your thoughts on it. So basically, at the end of the Terminator, spoilers, Kyle Reese dies. But he's the father of John Connor. So John Connor actually spent Kyle Reese into the past, knowing he was going to die, and knowing that was what was going to spark Linda Hamilton to become the female leader that she eventually becomes. So in essence, this gets back to the time travel stuff you were talking about at the beginning of the stream.
Right.
You've got a time loop. Sarah Connor is the leader of the Resistance and gives birth to John Connor, but none of that would have happened if the Terminator hadn't been sent back and Kyle Reese hadn't been sent back.
Exactly.
And Terminator 2 plays on this theme even further because it's actually the Terminator's tech, like what survived when Linda Hamilton crushed the Terminator at the end of the first film. That tech is what Skynet uses to create itself, essentially. So without the Terminator being sent back, you still get Judgment Day. And the thing that made the first two films so intelligent is they basically destroyed the time loop that was created by the first time jump. They had a completely encapsulated story. They should have just ended it, because none of it would have happened if the Terminator hadn't been sent back in the first place.
Yeah.
But then it gets kind of confusing. Of course, time travel theories are always confusing. That's why I don't really like to use them. But I thought the first Terminator did it right because they left it ambiguous and they let you kind of do the head scratching on your own after the film, which is really the only way to do a time travel film. Like, once you start weeding into the details, it doesn't really work.
Yeah. You don't mess with time.
Well,
unless you're AI.
Unless you're AI, yeah. So what are your thoughts? You have any theories about time travel or anything interesting you might want to comment on the concept?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't recommend time traveling. You could really screw it up.
So you would subscribe to the butterfly effect. You step on a butterfly's wings, you cause a hurricane somewhere else?
I thought the butterfly effect was you reincarnate back into yourself, but it's a different timeline. Like a whole different all these different things happen, so it's a completely different resulting.
Yeah, no, the butterfly effect is basically when you create the tiniest of changes in the past that has a cumulative exponential ripple effect into the future. And so, you can end up turning all of humanity into a toad if you screw with evolution, for example, by killing the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And I don't really like that theory myself. I kind of strangely liked Avengers Endgame approach of it, because you have to have all the preceding events that lead the people to go to the time travel thing in the first place. And then you also have to have the events in the future, which technically happened in the past because it's affecting the past. And so what you eventually get is a whole new timeline. But you would have to have completely separate timelines to make the whole thing work, because those loops, they would just implode on themselves. So, I kind of like to if that even makes any sense.
Well,
it's
it
all
does.
screwy when you start talking about it.
Well, I mean, they get into it with Loki. Have you seen that show?
I haven't. I've been depressed ever since Endgame ended.
Oh, well, I would recommend watching Loki because they delve into that quite a bit. So, spoiler. There's a lot of spoiler alerts while we're talking about that one.
Well, that's fine. We can talk about it. I mean, I'm probably never going to watch it. I hear it's very girl power-esque and into that MCU stuff.
Well, MCU stuff, yes. Girl power, Loki is actually like main power, or the main character.
Doesn't
the
get
whole
beat
thing.
up needlessly by a girl or something?
Yeah, but she's just being an asshole more than anything.
I haven't seen the show, so I've just seen the commercial where the girl's like racking him or beating him up for some reason.
Oh yeah, that's the female Loki. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, the
Didn't bother
people
you?
that no,
Okay.
no, because basically Loki met female Loki and they had a fight, and she kicked his butt because he was like, "What's going on?"
So she took him by surprise.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. He did fight back, and she did wind up kicking his butt anyways. And so I guess you could tie that in with girl power, but I wouldn't.
Okay.
It was a fair fight.
It was a fair fight. Okay.
But I guess, yeah, no, I don't really remember there really being any girl power stuff. There was several females in it, but
Yeah, well, that's fine.
but yeah, no, they go into the time traveling quite a bit, and basically the people in track of time snatch Loki and get onto him for traveling through time, more or less, and messing with that stuff because they wanted certain things to happen a certain way.
Gotcha. So there you go with the in-game's whole multiple timeline theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Loki's trying to get out of that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't mind the whole Terminator time loop theory. Again, if you keep it to the end of the film and you keep the loop contained, then it kind of works, sort of. It's real like a head scratcher, you know what I mean? I think it's the way John Connor puts it in the sequel. It's like, they don't exist if the time jump doesn't happen, but, they never would have existed. The war never would have happened in the first place if the time jump hadn't happened. So it's it's a really weird thing because you need the past to instigate the future event, but without that future event, you don't get the past.
Well, it's like, in the second one, when she goes after dude that found the arm,
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember his name. If she had not have gone after him, would things have happened the way they did later?
Well, presumably, yeah, because he would have invented the technology as if nothing had happened. But because she tried to kill him, because John and the other Terminator stopped him, he goes and destroys his own tech. See, they wiped out Judgment Day and stopped it at the end of the second one, and that worked because it created a tight loop.
But did they really stop it, or did they just postpone it?
Well, that's what the third one says. Third one says that they postponed it.
Yeah.
But see, that doesn't make any sense. How did they postpone it if means that they had, that Skynet or the company had to create Skynet, if all that stuff was destroyed and they had no more research to go off of, how did they create the system? The third one basically says Skynet became software, and it was impossible to stop at that point. But that just makes everything, that just adds a whole other component to it. Yeah, it was it's a little dated, but it's just a little bit. So anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, no, this first one is very good. The second one is very good.
Highly recommended.
Yeah, and I have an article that goes into more detail on it on Mind Matters News and on Substack. You can find it at GaryPaulVarner.com or MindMattersNews.com. Either way, I am currently in the middle of a review series for Terminator 3, and I plan to go through the whole franchise. So,
I highly recommend number 3.
I don't hate it.
Unless you're a kid, don't watch it. If you're a kid,
I don't hate it, but it ain't great. It's bad, but it's not franchise killing bad. Like, I will forever rant about the Alien franchise and specifically Alien number 3, because that, it takes a special kind of suck to kill a franchise indefinitely. Like, I can only think of 2 movies off the top of my head that just murdered not just the movie itself, but the entire franchise, and that'd be Aliens 3 and The Last Jedi. Like, franchise killing movies. That's a special kind of suck.
How does The Last Jedi kill the series?
You get rid of Luke. You get rid of any cause to even care about Star Wars.
Oh.
Which that's a whole other thing. You need to watch Muller's videos on The Last Jedi. There are so many problems in that movie. It is insane. I mean, it's just crazy.
I thought Luke just kind of went into the... What realm would that be? I don't know.
Yeah, it's
kind of like what Obi-Wan did.
Well, he became a Force ghost, but that's... A, that shouldn't happen. B, it's not just that. It's... Ryan, it's so hard to explain in this. Ryan Johnson basically killed every plot point Abrams had set up and left the next director with nowhere to go. So, that's the thing, is you had all this set up in the first one, which the first one wasn't good either, but J.J. Abrams had put in all these mystery boxes and all these different things to set the next one up and to basically set up the whole trilogy. And then Johnson kills Luke, who's supposed to train Rey, but doesn't. Then he kills Snoke, who's supposed to be the main antagonist, but isn't. And so Abrams is like, well, what the heck do I do with this movie now? So he ends up bringing Sidious back because he can't bring up a random baddie for the third movie. And so he's just stuck with nowhere to go. And of course, if you bring Sidious back, then you've got a whole bunch of questions about how to kill Sith and all the rest of it. I mean, he just, like, a really bad movie that wrecks a franchise kills its own lore.
Well, who exactly is Darth Sidious?
The Emperor.
Are you sure?
Yeah, as far as I know, nobody's said otherwise.
Well, there's speculation that it's Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's a silly theory, in my opinion. But I've heard that. It would have been hysterical, but I don't think that's where they were going with it. So, but I don't know. I mean, I thought they were going to do something big with Jar Jar Binks. I mean, he had this uncommon luck and everything like that. I thought he was going to be a major character, but I guess the fans really hated him, so they dropped whatever they were going to do.
Yeah. So there's a video I've seen that took a deep dive on that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I ought to send you that video.
Yeah. For sure.
I'll have to find it. I don't know if I could find it. It was a long time ago. Like, wow. It's been a long time since I've seen that.
We got any final thoughts on the Terminator?
I love them. I've only seen up to, I think, is Christian Bale's
Salvation.
when he was John Connor. That was the last one I watched.
Gotcha. All right. Well, guys, this is our Terminator review where we barely talked about the Terminator. That's all right.
Sorry.
That's all right. No, that's good, man. So, all right, guys. I think we're going to end the live stream here, and then we're going to end this episode. So thank you all very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Faith, Fiction, and Folklore. If you did, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Rumble. We can also be found on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Thank you again very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.